everyone. This is going to be a really exciting evening. We have, as always, aloha. We have, as always, just such distinguished guests, people, we've had other shows, other webinars that with Jill Stein, Medea Benjamin, Eleanor Goldfield, and it's been just very exciting. And today, I'm so excited that Ajamu Baraka is joining Matthew Ho, our 2016 vice presidential standard bearer, and a man who, if I had to read his whole bio, well, that's just all we would do tonight. Because that's the kind of distinguished background that Ajamu Baraka has. And as always, it's always an honor to be here with such distinguished guests who don't just talk the talk, but walk the walk in how they live their lives and what they've put on the line to make this world a better place. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce Ajamu Baraka. Ajamu Baraka is an internationally recognized human rights activist, writer, organizer, and geopolitical analyst with over 48 years of movement work in the US and internationally. Ajamu is on the executive committee of the US Peace Council, the leadership body of the United National Anti-War Coalition, the steering committee of the Black is Back Coalition, and is the founder and national organizer for the Black Alliance for Peace. He's a senior editor and contributing columnist for the Black Agenda Report and a contributor to a contributor to a number of news and opinion outlets. He was awarded the U.S. Peace Memorial 2019 Peace Prize and the Serena Shurham Award for Uncompromised Integrity in Journalism. In 2016, Ajamu was the Green Party's vice presidential candidate with Jill Stein in the 2016 presidential race. Yay. And as I like to say, I cannot hear you out there, but I know we are all giving a big hand and giving it up for Ajamu Baraka. Yeah. All right. And Matthew Ho, of course. Matthew Ho is a candidate for the 2022 North Carolina Green Party nomination for U.S. Senate. In 2009, Matthew resigned in protest from his post in Afghanistan with the State Department over the American escalation of the war. In 2010, Matthew was named the Weidenauer Prize recipient for truth-telling. Matthew's writings have appeared online and print periodicals such as the Huffington Post, USA Today, the Wall Street Journal, and the Washington Post. He's been a guest on hundreds of news programs on radio and television networks, including CBS, CNN, Fox, MSNBC, NPR, the BBC, and PBS. So again, I ask you all, though I cannot hear you, give it up for Matthew Ho and for Ajamu Baraka. And this is going to be a great discussion. I will get out of your way in a moment, but just to let you know, please put your questions in the Q&A section or in the chat. As always, I let people know there's no way to get to every question, but I will be leaving my email address, and if there's a question that you want answered, I will forward it to the proper people and we can keep this conversation going. But I will get to as many as I can, and this will be just a lively discussion among two heroic people who, as I said, have given it all for the movement, and that will go on for approximately a half hour to 40 minutes, and then we'll get to questions. So thank you all so much for being here, and with that, I am going to minimize myself, and Ajamu, take it away.
Well, thank you so much, Rose, and thank you, Matt, for inviting me to be part of this conversation. It's really a pleasure to have a chance to dialogue with you, Matt, someone who I admire, someone who has stepped up to present yourself for public service, And that is something that we need more of, people who have principles and values, and also a commitment to the possibility of us building something new. We know there's plenty of obstacles that you're facing and trying to, in fact, serve. And hopefully tonight we'll talk about how we can maybe address some of those barriers, but we have to address them because it's important that we bring voices like yourself into this process. It's important that we rededicate ourselves to not only supporting candidates like yourself, but also in doing the hard work of organizing structures that would allow us to go even further than our participation in the electoral process. So tonight, I'm assuming we're going to address a number of issues. For me, of course, we can't avoid the burning issue of the moment, which is Ukraine and the war, because of not only the fact that people are dying in a war that, in my opinion, was avoidable, but that this war is having a major negative impact on people well beyond the borders of Ukraine. In fact, people across Europe, in the US, and really globally are being impacted by this war. So we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about a lot of things, I'm assuming. Matthew?
Yeah, thanks, Ajamu. I really appreciate you being here. As Rose said, folks who are not familiar with Ajamu, I would say go to the Wikipedia page, and you're going to be like I am when I read it. It's like, man, I have not done very much with my life when you compare with this man. But I think that's why you're such an important voice, because you've had such a huge range of experiences. The depth of your knowledge, I think, is greeted by, right, and enabled by all the various things you've accomplished in your life, the places you've been, the people you've worked with, the people you've stood with, the people you've advocated for. It's inspiring to me. As you said, we have to build something. The title of this conversation tonight is Challenging the Bipartisan Consensus. And, I'm just the latest person to come along and take part in that challenge. You've been doing this for quite a while. So one of the ways I've kind of come up with who did I want to invite to my these series of webinars for the campaign were people who've personally inspired me, people who I look at and I say, that's who I want to be. So with Medea Benjamin, it was Jill, it was Eleanor Goldfield last week. We'll have Lee Camp on in a couple of weeks. People who are bold, and not only bold, but they have a certain presence and a quality to them that inspires others. And that's certainly the case. So thank you for joining us tonight. But, it is the war in Ukraine. And we know with the data we have off of the media that nothing else has been covered like this, and at least in terms of wars. We know that Ukraine is much more, is being much more broadcast and talked about and shown around the United States than any of the wars the United States has launched, has waged, has sustained over the last 30 or 40 years. So it is not just the latest thing in the sense of that as if it's some type of fad or some type of celebrity spat or whatever. It's a war where the brutality is unconscionable. But more than that, the repercussions and the consequences of it, spread. But, I think, for me, I don't like to get lost in the lost among the trees and miss the forest, so to speak. And so often in our dialogue, I think what I want to talk to you about is how do we keep pulling people back to the need to understand that this is the whole system. This is not just a war in Ukraine, and then we get into a whole fight over who started it, right? That should be a conversation because there's a lot of context, there's antecedents for what's happened here. There's reasons for it. But this to me is just one more manifestation or symptom of the disease of imperialism that can't be separated from the wars in Iraq, Afghanistan, Syria, Yemen, all throughout Africa, etc. The wars that occurred all through my childhood in Central America that I grew up watching on, learning about on the television, things like that. That we were just talking about Colombia. When I was in the Marine Corps, early in the Marine Corps in the late 90s, Colombia is where Marines wanted to go because that's where you could get into some action, right? And what was that war about? That had everything to do with American imperialism. So I think for you, how do you one, remind yourself to keep bringing it back to the big picture, right, to the forest, and not get lost in the trees, and then what do you say to people to kind of encourage them to while acknowledging the horror that's occurring in Ukraine, not to miss the bigger picture of it all?
Well, that's a very important question, and I think the way I approach it is probably how we might want to approach some of these questions this evening. For example, I think to get at this issue of imperialism, what that really means, and its impact concretely on people, we might want to talk about what is democracy, because that is very, very important on many levels, but in particular, for example, on what you are facing and trying to even get on the ballot,
right,
in the state. And so when we talk about what is democracy, then we can begin to look at how the U.S. has gotten itself and the world into the place we are today. When we talk about democracy in this country, it helps to expose the fact that the struggle for democracy is just that, a struggle for democracy, because right now we don't have a democracy. That's one of the reasons why we are in fact in Ukraine, because we have some very powerful interests that have an agenda that has nothing to do with us in terms of us benefiting from that agenda. It has everything to do with their very narrow agenda. And for them to realize their agenda, it usually translates into real harm for the rest of us in this country and globally. But if we had a fully functioning democracy in the true sense of the word, of the people being in power, then we would have the kind of conditions we're facing today. So, what are some of the limitations to having a fully functioning and viable democracy? Well, one thing is this duopoly. The fact that you have two parties representing basically two wings of the same ruling class. They have a monopoly over the electoral process, and they exercise that monopoly in such a way to push out and make it almost impossible for other voices to be part of the national conversation. So I was curious to know, what are some of as you came into this process, Matthew, what are some of the things that you are facing in the state trying to get on the ballot? And were you surprised with all of the barriers that you ended up coming across in trying to put yourself forward to, in fact, serve the people and what you thought to participate in a democratic process?
Yeah, no, thanks for asking that, because I was surprised, and I've learned a lot over the months as I've done this. Certainly when the North Carolina Green Party asked me to run, and I looked into it, I looked up the state the statutes and the regulations, and we need this many signatures. It's very clear. You need 13,865 signatures to get on the ballot. And I thought, okay, well, a lot of hard work. We get volunteers out. They got clipboards. We just hit the farmers markets, and we hit the Durham Bulls and Charlotte Knights games, and 1 week after the next, and we'll get there. And then you actually see what is required to do that. And so I think many people see this thing of, well, if you can't get signatures, then why are you going to try and be on the ballot? Who's going to vote for you then? If you can't organize, without understanding how difficult it is to actually get those signatures, and how the people who put these rules in place completely understand that. And that's why they're here. And so, you know, when you talk about this, when you say, well, we need, let's call it 14,000 signatures. Well, you have to get them verified. And it has to be pen on paper and only from North Carolina registered voters. Now, anybody can give a politician money from anywhere in the world, but only a North Carolina registered voter can sign a petition to get you on the ballot, right? So once you're on the ballot, or not even before you're on the ballot, the money can come from anywhere, right? I mean, so you just have like kind of this disparity in terms of how we treat the money versus how we treat voters, right? Where money is just open to everybody. You can get money from anything, but for voters, no, you can only get them from people that are registered in your state, which is probably the way it should be, right? You know, but, you know, so you have this verification process, which is about 75% of our signatures get verified. So when you say 14,000 signatures, you're really talking about 19,000 signatures. And as we all know, that any successful third party ballot initiative, anytime a third party gets onto the ballot, almost always one of the two corporate parties, whichever one feels the most threatened by them, sue, right? They challenge it. There's a great, and even within the parties themselves, there's a great scene from that Netflix film with Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, where she's a self-proclaimed socialist. She's challenging the third-ranking person in the Democratic Party. She collects thousands of signatures, 5 or 6 or 7 times the necessary number needed. And as she hands off her signatures to the borough, wherever in New York City she was handing them off to, as she's leaving, literally the lawyers from the Democratic Party are going in to challenge her. And this is within the Democratic Party, this is happening, right? Anyone who they feel is a threat, whether they're inside or outside the party. So you have this very real challenge, this really real obstacle. And then what happens is that as you're looking at it, okay, I need 19,000 signatures now at a minimum. And then you say, okay, well, how many signatures can a volunteer collect? Well, on a good day, a volunteer will get us 10, 15 signatures an hour on a good day, and sometimes they do better than that. But other times the day is terrible. There's a thunderstorm comes through. You don't get any. So then you start looking at how many person hours are we talking about here? How many thousands and thousands of hours? Well, in order to do this, we're going to have to pay people, because how else can they afford to be out there 10, 15 hours a week getting the signatures we need unless we pay them? And so we have within our campaign both people who are being paid. We pay $20 an hour, and people who are volunteering as well, because there are people who can give us their time. But when you look at this, you see the cost. And then the final thing I'll say about this, because I could be here for a long time talking about this, is that because there's money involved now, because you have to pay people to help you get on the ballot, now this has become an industry. And it's not so pronounced here in North Carolina because we don't have ballot referendums. But if you go to a state like California or Oregon, you'll see that there's an entire industry out there of petition gatherers, of ballot, of signature gatherers, because, both parties are interested in getting things on the ballot, referendums or other things, and they have the millions and millions of dollars to invest in it. Special interests have the same, right? Have the same ability to do that. So when there's a ballot referendum that challenges Tesla or Uber, they put in literally hundreds of millions of dollars to defeat it. And a lot of that gets put into this petition industry. So, as someone out in Oregon told me this past week, what they've realized out there is that if you don't have $100,000 to start off with, don't even consider trying to get something on the ballot, because you won't be able to do it. So if you're talking about building like we are, if we're talking about like challenging the two-party system as we are, well, how do you start off? As an organization that has that kind of money, where's that money going to come from? So you have all these challenges that these weren't challenges that just came about organically, right? These are not, like I've said this, people have heard me say this before, it's not like the weeds that are coming out in my garden right now. These are challenges that have been put there that look rather innocuous, that look like, oh, you just 14,000 signatures, get out there and with clipboards and get them, But when you understand how that actually works, you see that, no, this is really pretty nefarious. This is a very real form of voter suppression. And so I appreciate you giving me the opportunity to talk about this, but it's important because if we want to do the things we're talking about in terms of across the whole, whether it's strengthening, expanding, making our democracy more inclusive, whether it's doing something about climate change, whether it's doing something about, creating some type of economic bill of rights or ending the war on drugs or the wars overseas or the war at the border or any of those things, we have to break apart the political system. In order to do that, I feel like we have to, it's as if we're driving a wedge into a log or into a stump, right? We got to get that point in first. And this is what we're attempting to do. But I mean, I can't, on your end, when you were running the vice president, same kind of thing, or were there things that surprised you that you're just like, man, this is kind of like this is kind of like an evil genius way to keep people out?
Well, luckily we were able to, or the campaign was able to, in fact, get on the ballot. Of course, we was on the ballot in 46 states. What I wouldn't say surprised at, but what was very interesting to me was the extent to which the Democrat Party was attempting to try to undermine our campaign, and the degree of collusion, if you will, between the Democrats and the liberal media. It was a very interesting phenomenon to look up, and you have stories being written about you and people commenting on you in the New York Times and the LA Times, and I mean you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, it's like, and people are coming at you viciously, and
right.
it just sort of reminded me of how vicious this system really is, and that these folks are out to they don't play, they out to win. And not only are they out to win when it comes to third-party challenges, but even within their own processes. We have this national conversation now talking about voter suppression, but look at what happened not only during 2016, but also look what happened in 2020. We have party suppression, and within the Democratic Party itself, they engaged in a process of suppressing their dissidents. Angling the rules in such a way where they wanted to make sure that the candidate that the neoliberal elite wanted to put forward was in fact selected. So all of this stuff, to me, Matthew, just reminds us of the nature of what we're up against. That going back to this question of democracy. And that these kinds of campaigns that you're running and campaigns other people are attempting to run, we have to put, I think, front and center the question of democracy. We have to tell people that we have to fight for a real democracy if we're ever going to be able to effectively address these issues that are facing the people, facing the working class. Because it's quite clear that the ruling elements, the capitalist class, are quite aware of what needs to be done, and they have the resources to maintain their dominance and to make sure that there's a continuation of the power relationships that ensure that they're going to be able to advance their agenda to the detriment of the rest of us. So the issue is democracy, the fight for democracy, the fight for power for the people. That's why we start off our conversations most of the time saying all power to the people. It's just about building effective oppositional power to take this power from these individuals that would prefer to destroy the entire planet than to give up power.
Right. They would rather burn it all down than
Exactly.
to lose the short-term profits, if you will, that, however you want to explain it, as what they're trying to hold on to, and it's I can't remember if it's Noam Chomsky or Cornel West or who it is, who I've heard say, this is what democracy looks like when you have a nation that where might makes right and greed is good, all the slogans. I mean, this is what this is the system we have, because that's how our society operates. And when I say that, I find myself saying, well, it's not how our entire society operates. It's certainly not how my neighbors operate. It's not how people, we're both members of Veterans for Peace, and there are a number of folks from Veterans for Peace on here tonight. Not how people from Veterans for Peace operate. But it's the system that has been captured by those who live by those mottos of might makes right and greed is good. And you're exactly right. This urgency that we have to take hold of what we call our democracy, and then, in my opinion, break it apart, reimagine it, and rebuild it so that it represents the people, so that the power is with the people. I mean, because nothing else, we, as I said earlier, nothing else is possible if we don't do that. We will not get any action on climate change that is even worth discussing unless we retake and redo our democracy. And I even say, and when I say this, though, I find myself, as I'm saying those words, retake, I'm saying, wait, hang on, when did we ever really have it? And certainly there are different demographics that have experienced less democracy than, say, my demographic, right? But certainly in a sense of like the people, when have the people actually, and it's a struggle, it's a constant fight. I think you said that very well, because I think a lot of us, I get into this. All we got to do is abolish the filibuster, abolish the electoral college, and then we'll be on our way. And no, if we were to snap our fingers and get rid of whatever it is we don't like, there would be something else put in its place almost immediately. I mean, so that's why I think the urgency is this movement is the people behind it, right? It's the mass, an organized people's revolution, that actually represents working families. People haven't seen this week, there's a study that came out from Oxfam that showed a third of American workers make less than $15 an hour, which in many states, including in North Carolina, are more or less poverty wages now. With the cost of housing, with inflation, with all that. I mean, even before inflation, the cost of things. I mean, so this urgency, right, is there to seize, and that's what we have to do.
And the urgency is life and death.
It is,
because it's people are literally dying because they don't have the ability to be able to sustain themselves and to sustain their life.
Right.
When people don't have access to adequate health care, where people are living on the streets, where people have no ability to be able to have clean water. I mean, these are issues that are life and death issues. And when when the ruling elements will start wars that are unnecessary, that end up with people dying, and end up with people unable to be able to afford critical things like petroleum in a society like the U.S., in which you are dependent on a car in order to get to work, to do grocery shopping. When you have an inability to do that, an inability to get around to check on the elders who are living by themselves, where the services are being cut back so that you don't have effective elder care, where you have people who are not able to eat on a regular basis because the food prices have gone so expensive now they can't even afford, or they have to really be very, very careful how they allot their resources in order to eat. I mean, and then when you have a society and the state that cannot even ensure the most basic human right, which is the right to life, because it's unable to control a virus that has a disproportionate impact on poor people.
Right.
You have a situation that unless we have a real democracy, unless we're able to have a situation where the people are making the critical decisions that impact all of our lives collectively, if these individuals who have the power continue to have the power and make decisions that are advantageous to them only, then the suffering continues, the unnecessary deaths continue, the war continues. So this is not just sort of an abstract scholastic kind of demand. This is for life and death, because climate change is not going to happen as long as you have the energy companies able to influence the policies, as long as you have the rest of the capitalist class able to buy off politicians. Basically, we're not going to be able to get to the real issues that we face in terms of climate change. So this is a life and death struggle now. The contradictions are such where we can't play with this any longer. We can't sugarcoat it. There could be no ambiguity. We've got to be clear about what we need to fight for.
Yeah, and demand. You know, you said that, and demand. That's what this. We have to. We have to demand. 1 in 3 COVID deaths are tied to a lack of health insurance. 1 in 3.
Right.
We'll hit 1 million deaths from COVID. We probably already have, but if you just want to, we'll use the New York Times table for, sake of argument. We'll hit 1 million deaths in the next few weeks. That's more than 300,000 people dead to ensure corporate profits. That's all that is. So, the two things that you're saying, the life and death aspects of this and the demand. I mean, we have to demand it, and demand in a way that pulls down those who say it is better for our corporations to make record profits again this year than it is for our people to survive. I mean, and this just doesn't stop with healthcare or climate. I mean, this extends on and on and on. I mean, housing, I can't go anywhere in North Carolina. And even before the last several months, I was driving Uber for a while, to keep my head above water, and everything. And, that's what everyone wants to talk about. People get in the car, they talk about housing. When I'm out talking to people, they talk about housing. My neighbor stops me, talks about housing. I mean, the cause, even for people who own and who are not planning on going anywhere, it's terrifying, because what if something happens out of your control? Where are you going to go? So even people who are supposedly secure, which is a small fraction of us, it's terrifying. And then for the great majority of us that are dealing with these costs, it is life and death. You tell me my neighbor who had to move with her kids because her place got sold and the rent went up by 65 or 70%. That's not life and death. She had to move farther away. I mean, how much money is left at the end of the month in her checking account? Can she cover the deductible this month for her kids going to the doctor? I mean, it's all interconnected.
Yeah.
It all is interconnected. And this idea that somehow these are issues that can wait, and that we just got to give the Democrats more time, or we just got to let the system play out, or we got to somehow say that, well, the threat from Trump and the fascist Republicans is greater than the deaths of our neighbors. And what I say, and what I believe we say, is like, no, both need to be confronted. We cannot just simply say, we're only going to accept this challenge. We're only going to face this crisis. You're only going to face this potential catastrophe, and ignore, because it comes again back to might makes right and greed is good. And that's who ultimately this two-party system continues to serve.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, we have to we have to make these demands for human dignity our central demands. That it makes no sense for us to live in a society in which housing is, in fact, a situation that people are unable to experience, where more than 500,000 people every day don't know where they're going to lay their head that evening.
Right.
That is an obscenity.
Right.
But until we make housing a human right, and education and healthcare and a clean environment, and food and the right to leisure and the right to be able to have a decent wage, until we make these rights, then we're going to have this kind of societal wide precarity. And unfortunately, this kind of insecurity that people experience in their lives has become so normalized. Many people believe that this is just the way things are, and that you can't change it. And that's why, you know, campaigns like yours is so important, to be able to tell people that we can do and be more than what we are today, but you have to believe in that.
Right. You know,
believe in that.
Exactly. You know, with my campaign, I was looking at the other day in terms of our issues, and, you know, it comes down to what are my priorities: human rights, accountability, and sustainability. And they're all connected. You just so well described the importance of understanding, respecting, and acting upon the dignity of all, right? And the need for all of our rights as humans to be met. The accountability piece for me is where is the accountability? Those who have violated, those who've trampled on, those who've made how many in our country suffer for what reasons? Again, for profit and greed, so that they could be mighty. You know, where is the accountability for them? And whether it be the wars overseas, whether it be all the people we know who've lost people to overdose deaths, whether it be the 22,000 people still in detention, you know, held as criminals only for trying to get their families across the border for a better life. You know, I mean, where is the accountability for all that? And if you don't have that accountability, then how can you ever have any sustainability? Right? As well as into it circles back around. We have in this country this attitude. My friend said this the other day, you know, with regards to, say, student debt cancellation and medical debt cancellation. The argument seems to be, well, I had to pay for it, so you have to pay for it as well. And he said, where are the principles and the values in that? What are you suggesting? You know, and his joke was that it's the equivalent of saying, I had lead poisoning growing up, so you have to have it too. Right? You mean like this anti, not only just the anti respect for the lives of others, for the denial of any compassion or empathy or desire to see people prosper, but also too this insane, it reminds me of the Taliban. This idea of that, like, well, time stops and there's no more progress. Right? This is the best we're ever going to do, and we're never going to do. And so the health insurance system we have now works for a few. That's good enough, and we're never going to advance it. The education system works for a few. It's good enough. We're never going to advance it. Right? I mean, et cetera, et cetera. Housing. I mean, if I have to hear one more person say we can't do rent control for whatever reason they come up with, I'm going to have an aneurysm. I mean, the attitude towards housing is obscene. And it is such filled with such graft and such a racket, in the sense that you hear the same arguments over and over again for how we're going to deal with housing. Well, we're going to rezone, and we're going to use special tax incentives, all the things that have done nothing to help our people, but everything to help the developers and the real estate industry and the banks. You know, so it's this, you know, for me, it keeps cycling back to the human rights that you described, right? And how are we held accountable for ensuring those human rights are met? And how do we sustain those human rights? Because one of the things that really scares me about the coming climate collapse, the climate chaos, however we want to describe this, is that it's just not going to be the natural consequences, the wildfires and the hurricanes and the rising sea level, et cetera, but it's going to be societal collapse, our societal infrastructure, And how do we sustain ourselves? How do we make sure that people have what they need, as we're dealing with those consequences? But even without that, right now, the crises that people are going through now demand, such a thing as like the economic Bill of Rights you were describing.
And unfortunately, and it goes back to a point you made earlier, in terms of how people see what the immediate challenges are. And so people are looking at they're looking at the possibility of the Republicans regaining control of the government beginning in 2022 and in 2024. And they are looking at, or they are getting themselves prepared for another one of these lesser of two evils kind of participation. But we have to remind people that's not that simple. And we have to remind people of what happened last year, the latter part of last year, when you have the Democrats who controlled the presidency, they controlled the House, and they had the ability to pass legislation with a tiebreaker in the Senate. And they couldn't even or wouldn't even pass the Build Back Better legislation. They would have provided some modicum of relief for the working class. They played, or they pretended like they had these internal issues. They tried to put it on just on Joe Manchin. But this is nothing but a cynical game that they were playing. So what do we benefit when the Democrats have political power?
Right.
So people have to make an argument as to why you are going to engage in this lesser of two evilisms in 2022 and 2024, because basically it's quite clear that they have an agenda. They are serving forces that have nothing to do with you. And we've got to be clear about that. You have to be clear. They have to be clear about that. That basically, if it's not about struggle and trying to take power from these folks, then basically you are BSing yourselves and everybody else. So they did all this struggle between the Republicans and the Democrats and the so-called contradictions. They couldn't pass Build Back Better, but they stopped the debate around Build Back Better and went in and voted for what? A bipartisan record military budget.
Right.
So bipartisanship is possible. It's possible for the military budget, and it's possible for war, because the legitimation crisis that Joe Biden was facing toward the latter part of 2021, he still faced that to a certain extent. But what happened? They took the country into war. And so we're not talking about the sufferings of the working class anymore. Every night we're subjected to this morality play around Ukraine.
Right.
So we've got to be able to cut through this, as difficult as that might be, because look, war is terrible. And for the first time in decades, partial reality of that has been presented to the US public, and they're horrified. And that's understandable. But instead of people concluding that war is terrible and therefore we need to end it, they're being manipulated into calling for more war. And so we have to remind people that, okay, you've been exposed to what's happening in Ukraine. Imagine what you weren't exposed to that was unfolding in Yemen or in Syria. What about those 50,000 civilians that died with the NATO attack in Libya? Okay, now people say, oh, that's whataboutism. Another one of those little cute words that the collaborative left comes up with to give themselves cover and to justify their collaboration with the ruling elements. We've got to have the boldness and the courage to not worry about that and tell the truth, provide the context so people can understand what it is we're up against and therefore where we need to go.
Yeah, right. And it's, when you really look at it too, the degree of overlap between the two parties, the corporate parties, the Democrats and Republicans, it's really pretty great. Look at what happens during COVID, where they are both more than happy to throw trillions of dollars at Wall Street and at the corporations. They pump $100 billion a month into the asset markets. That's how you get this inflated stock market. This is why Elon Musk is worth $350 billion now, because the Fed has a $7 or $8 trillion balance sheet now, right? They agree on that. They agree on the Paycheck Protection Program, which is, as I think a lot of us were expecting, turned out to be one big grift, right? I mean, it all went to the corporations. The workers really didn't see too much of that. Might have helped out some, but you're really talking, again, crumbs off the table. You know, they agree on that. I mean, they agree on, I just heard this today, that corporate profits have gone from $1 trillion in 2008 to $3 trillion last year. They've tripled corporate profits in the last 14 years during the midst of the two greatest depressions in the American economy since the 1930s.
Right.
And so the overlap between the parties, when it comes to the things that ensure the wealthy get wealthier and the workers struggle, they are in absolute lockstep. And yeah, no, we've got to go to question and answer. But no, thank you for this. It's inspiring, and your ability to articulate, you know, and say, you know, this is why it's urgent. You know, this is why you're one of the leaders in our movement. And so I really thank you for joining me tonight. And we're gonna head on over to Q&A that Rose will lead for us. And again, I don't think I thanked everyone for joining. So my apologies. Thank you all for being here tonight.
Thank you. Excuse me. So let's get to questions here. Okay, one from Joshua Bradley that I think is a really good way to start this out. Due to the propaganda war in the US, it's almost impossible to get reliable information about the war in the Ukraine. Are there any untainted news sources to get information out about what's actually happening over there?
Mm.
I would put that to both of you.
Well, I'll just, go ahead, please.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, first thing, because you're, you know, Black Agenda Report, which is something you're a part of, in which the folks you have right in there, they put out very, very incisive commentary and analysis that I find the equivalent of in very few places. And I'm saying this not because you're sitting here, but because that's one of the places I utilize. But please.
No, I appreciate that. I think that is a very important place to go. I mean, it's a struggle to try to get information that will allow you to make an analysis that has any kind of relationship to what is really happening on the ground. You know, once a war starts and you have both sides engaged in war propaganda, it's difficult to try to get to the truth. But the one thing you don't do, which I've seen people do uncritically, and I've been surprised at some of the people who have engaged in this, and that is when a story comes out of an atrocity, for example, and there's no way to verify exactly what happened, but you have one side that's framing it in a certain way. It's understandable that the public might get manipulated like that. But I've seen some elements that I think should know better,
right?
Who would run with the story and basically prop up the propaganda on one side over the other. And unfortunately, by propping up the propaganda of one side, and I think this is my position. So this has nothing to do with Matthew's campaign. This is Ajamu. I think that the U.S. is 100% responsible for this war in Ukraine, and it's for a number of different reasons. So by propping up the propaganda that plays into this morality of the evil Russians and all of that, you are basically providing more ammunition for creating more support for war as opposed to the kind of demands that many of us are making. We're making demands saying immediate ceasefire and a negotiated settlement.
Right.
Stop the arms, withdraw from the field of battle, et cetera, et cetera. But instead of that kind of conversation, that has to happen because that's going to be what's going to happen anyway. It's going to be a negotiated settlement.
Right.
To play into this fantasy of a victory on the part of the Ukrainians, to me, is so incredibly cynical. I am so pained every time I watch or look at the Western press and to see how they are playing the people and how they are playing the Ukrainians. That's why I have no respect for Zelensky. So it's very difficult. You have to go different. You got to go to the Asian Times. You got to go. You look at the Counterpunch. You got to go online and look at some of the people who are providing critical analysis. It takes time. You have to read between the lines of the bourgeois press, but you've got to remain always critical and question everything you see and are exposed to.
Right, exactly. And I think that's look, I've done a lot of foreign policy work. And so I watch Al Jazeera English and I watch TRT, which is the Turkish state media, and I watch French 24, so I watch a lot of international because I find that they tend to do a really pretty good job because they take a different, they're not profit driven in their media coverage as the American press is. However, I put a huge asterisk on that. If I wanted to have any information on the war in Syria, I don't go to the Turkish channel and I don't go to the Qatari run Al Jazeera either. So anything that their governments, so it's like what you said, the honest is really on us. The responsibility and obligation is on us to have that type of critical approach to what we're consuming. And it takes time, as you said, because you have to give places an opportunity to prove themselves. So consistently, how is the coverage? Is the coverage ignoring things, or is it overemphasizing things? And you pick up on this as you consume over time, but it's you have to cast a wide net. You have to, I think we can get into a whole conversation about the failures of the American education system to not teach critical thinking, but rather to teach this is the correct answer to the test. The teacher said Kalamazoo, Michigan, that's it, final answer, don't think about it anymore. So I think we have much broader societal problems here that then the corporate profit-driven media latches into, and then it pulls, of course, the great robe of patriotism around itself to make everybody feel good about what they're watching. And I'll say with the Ukraine war, absolutely, you called it earlier, morality play. And the idea that any war is some type of explanation of good versus evil. I think we can agree there are wars that meet that criteria, and almost always we are on the wrong side of those wars, particularly in the last 75 years, say. I'd be hard pressed to say which ones we're on the right side of, I don't know if we can. But, this idea that somehow that there's a storyline in this of good versus evil, where the whole thing is dirty, where to me, the Ukraine war is fundamentally about fossil fuels, to a larger degree, it's about commerce and about the megalomania that exists in Washington, D.C., in London, in Moscow, and in Kiev. That is what the only people who have my interest and attention in the Ukraine war are the actual Ukrainian people, as well as the Russians who have been put into this war. Those kids in the Russian army who, thought they were going on a training exercise or whatever the story is, right? And now they're killing and being killed for something that they probably don't want to be a part of. So, getting back to Josh's question, though, there are a lot of different avenues, and certainly, I try and keep myself, honest about what I'm listening to in terms of the podcast and everything. And if something if something comes across as too conceited, as too much, there's too much there's a chauvinism that I don't like. Of course, this idea that everything needs to be neutral and objective is, I don't think even possible. But as long as people are intellectually and morally honest about it, I mean, I think of our friend, say, Chris Hedges. I kind of use him as a standard in a lot of things because I do believe he is intellectually and morally honest. And are people approaching this? I saw Abby Martin was put into the comments as well. Certainly, Abby is another one who I look to and I say that's someone who I believe is intellectually and morally honest. And so what am I listening to when I'm walking my dogs and listening to my podcasts and trying to keep up with things? I've been listening to this person for a while now. Do I believe they're being intellectually and morally honest? I mean, so again, it comes back to us in terms of, being responsible for the media that we're consuming, because we're making the choice of what's going to inform us, and so, but it's complicated. It's not easy. And Josh, sorry if we didn't give you the specific, go and watch this thing, but I know your brother and I know, I know if I know anyone in the Triangle area who's doing a good job of being intellectually and morally honest, it's Joshua Bradley. Josh, for people who don't know, is running for city council in Raleigh.
Yeah.
He is one of the few people running who actually will represent workers in their families in Raleigh. So please, Josh, can you put in the chat box your website? But just go and Google Joshua Bradley for Raleigh. He is, he will F things up on that Raleigh City Council like they could never expect. And that's probably the best thing that could ever happen to the city of Raleigh is someone coming in, hey, it's Holy Week. Joshua Bradley would be like Jesus in the temple, overturning the tables of the money changers. Not to be too hyperbolic or to be too exaggerated, but that's the kind of guy. And that's what Raleigh needs, because Raleigh, if we talked about housing earlier, Raleigh has a city council that is completely captured by developers. Developers from New York give hundreds of thousands of dollars to Raleigh City Council members. The mayor of Raleigh, her part-time job is mayor. Her full-time job is to work for a construction company. That's the type of just racket that is being run. And Josh would do a wonderful job upsetting that racket. So, but Rose, I'll get off my soapbox.
What I'm going to do is just, I think as a continuation, is I'm going to more summarize some of what's out there. And so Madeline Hoffman, for example, says, how do we deal with the lies upon lies? The media lied about Syria, and now we're using Syria in the wrong way to justify Ukraine. But moving, in that direction, there's somebody who, is a supporter of this campaign, regular watcher, but of these webinars. And there's a lot of commentary on, Putin massacring civilians. And I think that, these things need to be touched upon, because this is a 24/7 campaign. And I say this without, I'm not, because I don't want to come off as, I have no sympathy for the Ukrainian people, because I of course do, and any victims, civilian victims of war. But there's a mass demonization campaign that's making the US the hero,
right?
Putin the Hitler of our time, and I feel like Ajamu, Matt as well, but Ajamu, I just think you're somebody who could really address this straight on.
Well, as you said, Rose, any rational and moral human being will be opposed to war. No one wants to see the kind of suffering and destruction that we see in war. And that's why many of us fight so hard, struggle so relentlessly to try to ensure that we can avoid war. Mm-hmm. And when wars start, to try to end them.
Right.
And that's why some of us are so outraged by the crude propaganda that's being fed to the U.S. public on a daily basis. And one of the things that I really don't like getting into all the details of this. There's some few I'm a vet. I saw Al. There's a few vets on this program. When you see the U.S. talk about the deliberate targeting of civilians and all of that, we're into 8 weeks of war, and the estimate is something like a little bit over 2,000 civilians who have died, 2,000 precious lives. Okay,
Right.
but if the Russian military was in fact targeting deliberately civilians, and that taking the kind of position that they took, maybe to their detriment when they went into Ukraine, the numbers will be off the chart. And the U.S. military are the experts in that, in terms of how you go into a situation with shock and awe, how you basically target. Look, you have a war where people are still on their cell phones and using the internet, and the rail system is still working. It's like, what that people have, what kind of war is this? What kind of war targeting the civilian infrastructures, all of this is this all about? The U.S. goes in, they will target the electrical grid. They would blow up the water sanitation processes, the food storage places. They blow up the bridges. I mean, total destruction. That's the kind of war that they understand and conceptualize. So, folks, don't fall for all this. You know, this is BS. You know, we want the war to stop. You know, don't take the side of your government that started this situation back in 2014 when they overthrew a democratically elected government. And then there was a subsequent war for 8 years, and where 14,000 people lost their lives. But nobody talked about that because that wasn't brought before your attention. Okay? So don't let them manipulate you so easily. Okay? You are not on the U.S. is not innocent. They're not on the right side. The U.S. is responsible for the most horrendous crimes against humanity in the annals of human history. Okay, so later for that U.S. exceptionalism, you're not morally superior. Your responsibility is to stop these wars, to not take up to not be sentimental about your own government, because your government is perceived by people around the world as the #1 violator of human rights on this planet.
Right. It's you know, this is why I wear this white poppy, which is for the victims, all the victims of war. It doesn't. There's not a nationality attached to it. There's not a side attached to it. The whole thing is criminal. The whole thing is criminal, and it's organized murder. Look, from 2014 to 2018, the United States Air Force and United States Navy destroyed every city in eastern Syria, western Iraq, and northern Iraq. Every city along the Tigris and Euphrates River valleys has been flattened, and that's not an exaggeration. Entire cities are gone. We don't hear it. The people of Iraq have higher cancer rates in their children than were ever recorded after Hiroshima and Nagasaki atomic bombings. And that type of murder, we are going to be killing Iraqi children for generations, no matter what we do. If someone comes up with a magic wand and we wave it and all the troubles go away, their children are still going to die for generations, just as we did to the Vietnamese. They're still dying. And I have a friend on here too, just as we did to our own veterans, our own veterans' children died from the poisoning we did in Vietnam. And so, I mean, you have this idea that somehow we can separate ourselves, and that because there are atrocities committed in another war somehow excuses us. Of course, there have been atrocities committed in Ukraine. It's war. It's organized murder. I remember when I was on television to discuss the helicopter footage that WikiLeaks put out in 2010, when that American Apache helicopter killed 12, 13 people, including children, an ambulance crew, and journalists. And my response was, when I was asked, what do you think of this? My response was, what do you think we've been doing over there for the last decade? This is what it's like. In Afghanistan, we bombed entire villages. Thankfully, now we have journalists like Anand Gopal and Azmat Khan who are uncovering this and talking about these things. But for how many decades did we just wantonly destroy life with no accountability, no care, no coverage? And now, and I'm glad we're seeing what's happening in Ukraine. We should see it. There should be this type of coverage. There should be this type of coverage of every war. Almost at least 400,000 Yemenis have died, many of them by being starved to death through an air and naval blockade by the Saudis that would be impossible if not for the American government and the American military. At least 400,000 dead.
Right.
And we claim that somehow the most evil thing happening on the planet is in Ukraine. This idea that there's some type of hierarchy, that there's some type of order among the criminals that run these. Look, these oligarchs exist in all countries, and they could. I mean, one of the things I feel we have to get back to is the spirit of internationalism, right? This idea that, look, we're all against the powers that are controlling. We're all against the moneyed interest. We're all against the arms industries. You don't think the Russian arms industry is making incredible amounts of money right now? I mean, the whole thing is crooked. The whole thing is dirty. If people want to understand, I'll end on this. I get asked often, how did it happen that in 2012, Barack Obama chastised Mitt Romney for saying that Russia was an enemy? You know, if people remember in the 2012 debates, Romney said, Russia is our main enemy. We need to be concerned. And Obama said, you know, basically, the Cold War is calling. They want your trope back, you know, and, you know, but within a year, United States policy on Russia had spun around. And what had happened? Well, a lot of things happened, but one of them is that in April of 2013, Dominion Energy, which is either the first or second biggest energy company, power company in the United States, filed to begin construction on their Cove Point liquid natural gas facility to create it into an export terminal. They put almost $4 billion into that construction. Where was that gas? Where's that gas supposed to go? To Europe. I'm not saying that was the reason why things changed, but it certainly is one of them. And you start to see the same pieces appear. Again, might makes right. Greed is good. And Rose, I'll give it back to you.
Thank you. Thank you both. So I think we have time for one more question. And this one is from Lizzie Adams. And it's directed to Ajamu because, you know, you're in Colombia and I'm sure, you know, understand the political environment there. So Lizzie Adams asks, Afro-Colombian environmental defender Francia Marquez is the vice presidential running mate of leftist frontrunner Gustavo Petro. A truly democratic election in Colombia would be a major and welcome shift. How can we support these candidates for the upcoming May 29th, 2022 presidential election in Colombia? A few US Greens are looking into heading down as election observers. Ajamu, are there other ways we can be in solidarity?
Mm-hmm. Well, and I'm glad that Madeline's on this call also, because she has a lot of experience in Colombia. I would say that, and just so, yeah, this is very exciting because there's a real possibility that we're going to have a shift in power to a certain extent because the ticket has a very good possibility of winning. And it's a very interesting, it's interesting on various levels. As people may not know, if Petro in fact wins the presidency and Francia is the vice president, the president in Colombia can only serve one term. So not only do we have the historic occurrence of a Black woman on this major ticket, but if they win, we have the possibility of Francia Marquez being the front runner to become the president of Colombia. That's truly historic. And it's so historic, though. Francia has been the subject of intense death threats. She's already under death threats. She has to move and has been moving for the last few years with armed guards. But that has picked up even more. Francia is someone that I've known since she was 16. She is also a member of the Black Community Process here in Colombia, which is the largest, probably most important of the Black organizations, a organization that I'm also a member of, just to be open, okay? So it is a very, very historic event. But even with the upcoming election, the violence in this country continues. They are still targeting social leaders. There's still the issue of impunity here in Colombia from the national strike last year, where the U.S. trained special police forces murdered a few dozen people. So even if they win, there's still a lot to do in terms of trying to shift the direction of this country. And the last little quick piece, we're very concerned that the Biden administration a few weeks ago made an important announcement where they talked about the importance of the continuation of the relationship between the U.S. and Colombia. And they sort of emphasized the military sort of relationship. And we thought that was very, very worrying because, you know, the way politics operate here in Latin America, we saw that as sort of a signal that if through the electoral process, the political right loses, that if extra legal activity is engaged in, that the right wing would not have to worry about any real opposition coming from the Biden administration. And that's very, very concerning.
Oops, thank you. I had my mute button on for a moment there, forgot that. Thank you so much. Before, this has been a great discussion, and as always, it's really such an honor to be able to be part of this. And before we go to closing remarks, well, people who've been here before know it's coming. And if you haven't, you're in for a treat, because I'm about to ask you for money. Look, we all know that Matt is an amazing candidate, and that this is an important candidacy for the Green Party. The Green Party needs a candidate like Matthew Ho on the ballot. We need to be able to shake up the establishment in this way. We need someone who is a serious peace advocate, a serious advocate of, attacking this culture of austerity at home and war abroad, and somebody who has the background to back it up. As I said, Matt's somebody who doesn't just talk the talk, he walks the walk. And as has been brought up here, it is, these hurdles are put up so that if you're not part of the big money parties, they make it very hard. Now, right now, I think we're approximately 8,000 signatures in. We need 14,000 signatures, but let me be straight. What that means is we need at least 18,000 signatures. Why? Because they're going to throw some signatures out. And, we've got to be looking at a 75% to 80 optimistically percent approval rate. So we're not really looking to get 14,000 signatures. We're looking in the next month to get 10,000 more signatures, and that costs money. And that's why I'm asking for a hero tonight. As I like to say, I'm holding out for a hero, and the maximum you can give to this campaign at this time is $2,900. And if we got even one person to do that, that's going to buy us nearly 1,000 of those signatures. Is there anybody here tonight who can do 2,900?
And let me make sure people know that we've got the people in place. We've got the organization. Rose, as campaign manager, has done a great job, shepherding all together. But then the folks down here with the Green Party, Michael and Tommy and Wayne and Tony have done a terrific job, these last months, putting together the organization, getting the people we need, getting the kind of the our own little bureaucracy, right, to get all these signatures all around the state, get them to 100 different counties to be verified. So there's been a lot that's gone into this. And the fact that we are a month away, we need 10,000 signatures. It's very, very doable. We've got the people in place. They've been out getting signatures. We've got big events coming up where there'll be thousands of people. We've got early primary voting coming up as well. And, let's all knock on wood and hope the weather holds and we get a nice spring for the next 4 or 5 weeks here in North Carolina. But we've got the people to do it. We've got the organization to do it. To get the amount of signatures we need is entirely possible, as long as we can continue to pay our folks to get out there. Because again, how do you expect these people to get out there and put it 10, 15? We've got one of our guys is on the call tonight, Nick. Nick put in 18 hours for us last week collecting signatures. Nick's got to eat, guys. It's also as well too. It kind of comes back to our values though. Like if we're going to say we're a pro-worker party and we're just going to subsist on volunteers, we're not really living up to our values, and that's going to cause a rot, right? That's going to cause us not to make it. So just another thing, just throw it back to Rose. But if people, and I'll say too, I recognize a lot of names on the participation list. I know a lot of you have given already. And what I'm asking is that if you could give again, if you could double what you gave again, this will get us onto the ballot. And if we're on the ballot, we can do all the things that Ajamu and I were talking about tonight, and we can really, really cause a disruption in the political system at the federal level and at the state level that will help working families and will do something for the planet.
Yes, thank you, Matt. And now, and Madeline, thank you. The New Jersey Green Party, I do have to give a shout out to them. They have been great friends to this campaign. And thank you so much. They've just been truly generous with both money and time. And I thank them so much. Thank you, Madeline. You're the best.
Thank you, Madeline, and everyone in New Jersey. Yeah.
So can anybody do 1,500? I know I'm asking for big bucks. I know, but one of the reasons that, how do I ask for this kind of money? And people can tell that I feel no shame. And how is that? Because damn it, the Democrats and the Republicans are funded by millions and millions of dollars that's gone into the war machine, that goes into a medical system that is for profit, that's killing people. That I've brought this up before, and sometimes it makes me teary-eyed, but it's not going to tonight, that my husband died at the hands of a cruel medical system that left him, that he walked into a hospital with cellulitis, and by the time they were finished with him, he had severe sepsis, he had pneumonia, and finally the COVID that killed him. So I can't feel shame over asking people to give big for a campaign that's for us, that's for our future, that's for our democracy. And so what people could do, if you could do 1,000, if I got any champions out there who could do 1,000, thank you, Nick. I appreciate that. That will make a big, big difference. So, like I said, I'm going down line now, but we're coming out of here with something because we need it. And actually, I have found that fundraising is picking up, and that's great. Thank you so much, Maria. And by the way, people who can't give this kind of money also understand I can't give that kind of money. I can't either. Which I give a lot of in politics, but It's not like I have that spare 2,900 lying around to give to campaigns. So I totally understand that. All right,
All right.
man, $20. Can
And-
anybody do,
All right,
all
Doug.
right, Doug. Yes, Doug is donating 1,000 and he is raising. Yes, Doug is awesome. I've gotten to know Doug recently and he is raising money for the campaign. And he's committed to raising 5,000. And so thank you so much. Anyone who could do 250 tonight.
And I saw our friend Al, who's out in the Outer Banks. And if people don't know who Al Glakowski is, do yourself a favor. After this call is over, Google Al Glakowski pirate. And you'll be absolutely amazed at who's sitting in this call with us, the type of person who we have in our midst. And yeah, I mean, just look, I could have run as a Democrat, right? I had the bona fides to do it. I've got all my 501c3. I was on a 501c4 that was a Democratic organization, basically, and I chose not to because I knew I would never have a guy like Al Glakowski on a call with me if I was running in the Democratic Party. I would never have the opportunity to do a conversation like this tonight with someone like Ajamu, if I was running for the Democratic Party. So, being a third party candidate is really meaningful to me. And you all joining us and the people who are supporting this campaign, it strikes me in a way that I hope everyone understands. Yeah. So thank you all for everything you're doing to help the campaign and for being here tonight.
And if anyone could do 100, 150, these amounts make a difference. They add up.
I will do 100 when I get my Social Security in 2 weeks, but not a week and a half.
Thank you, Ajamu.
Thank you.
Ajamu is going to give 100. So thank you. That's great. Ellen just gave 25. Tarak is giving 100. Joan did 1,000.
Thank you, Joan. And thank you, Joan.
See, this is why I hold out for heroes, because I get some here. Yeah.
But thank you, Tarak and Ellen. Naima,
100.
Yeah.
Al's gonna match Ajamu. Yeah, so I guess so. I've said this before and I'll say it again.
Hamid, $50. Thank you.
50. Thank you so much. I think everyone who is challenging this disease system is a hero to me, and who are out there doing what they need to do and supporting candidates like Matthew Ho. And let me tell you, we're going to get mad on the ballot. The Democrats aren't getting out of this one. They can put these impossible goals out there, but there's a line from a Billie Holiday song: "The difficult we'll do right now, the impossible will take a little while."
Rose, did you see Naima? That
Naima, did I miss her?
$100.
Oh, thank you, Naima.
Yeah, it's a look. And as Doug just said,
I got so many messages coming. Yes, I see that. Thank you, Naima.
Rich,
all right, right on.
Rich Moser just donated $300. Rich has been a great friend for the campaign.
That's great.
Really big friend for the campaign. And as Doug Zachary just said on the chat thing, the $5. Yeah, it's it's one of those things that and I've done fundraising before, and so I knew this, but it's really striking me again, like it all helps. It all builds up. It really does. And it also does something for me in the sense of like, because I know there's a reason why everyone is supporting the campaign. And I know it's just not because we've read the same books. It's because of our life experiences. I mean, what Rose tells about her life, and you've all heard me talk about my stuff in my life and people around me. But I know every one of you is here tonight because of experiences in your life, people you love. And that's what motivates to do what we do. It's the people in our lives who we have seen suffer and who are suffering. And that's why we have to do all these things we're talking about, actually create democracy, because Ajamu is right. We don't have it.
Well, thank you so much. And everybody who donated, and if I did not give you a shout out, it's just because the chat was moving fast. And but thank you, thank you, thank you. And now I am going to give the floor over to Ajamu for his closing remarks, and then to Matt. And it's been a great evening, wonderful discussion. Thank you so much for being here, Ajamu.
And thank you, Rose, for your hard work and your boldness in asking for money, because as you know, when you're trying to fundraise, you've got to be bold. And of course, thank you, Matt, for stepping forward. You and I talked about before the fact that yes, you could have run as a Democrat. They would have framed you as one of their upcoming stars. Yeah. But you decided to go a different direction. You decided to follow your values and your principles. And we really, really appreciate that. And that's why I think it's so important that no matter what happens with this campaign, that the momentum that you're generating, the people that are coming to your campaign from North Carolina, if they have not been active in the party, I think that the consolidation of those forces can be a very powerful contribution to the party in North Carolina. Because for the Green Party to be an effective party, we've got to bring in new forces, forces that will take the party as seriously as it should be taken, forces that recognize that this is a protracted struggle, and it requires patience and consistency. And so if people understand that, then they will be more active, and they won't be discouraged when things may not go our ways in terms of signatures, elections, or whatever. So we are in a fight for our lives here in this country. But we're in a fight that has an impact on the entire planet. We have a particular kind of responsibility, being at the heart of empire, to engage the powers that be, to demonstrate to people around the world that we are in fact in solidarity with everyone that's engaged in the struggle to build a new world. So thank you all for being a part of this process. Again, thank you, Matthew, for inviting me. And we pledge that from the Black Alliance for Peace, we will continue to raise the serious and hard questions. We will continue to try to build a more effective anti-war and anti-imperialist movement here in this country. And we urge everyone to participate in that process. Don't let them manipulate you into supporting their nonsense. Don't let them manipulate you into spreading their talking points. Our responsibility is to oppose this war and to oppose all imperialist wars, no matter where the source emanates from. So thank you, everyone, and let's continue the struggle. Let's make sure that Matthew is successful. But let's make sure that we build also a viable and effective alternative, because again, is about building democracy and building real people's power. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. It is. It's about that. I've said it before, like I've got goals for this campaign. You get on the ballot, get in debates, do well in the general election, but all of that falls underneath the overarching goal to continue to build. I don't like to say build because it makes it sound like, hey, I'm just starting out, and but continuing to build on what's already been done. That so many people, and we can go back to Eugene Debs, right? We can go back to Abraham Lincoln and the Republicans if you want. I mean, we can go back. I mean, keep going back and back to see where people moved forward in a way together in order to just get fundamental justice, fundamental equality fundamental prosperity. Thank you all for being here tonight. Look, we can get on the ballot with your help. We get on the ballot. We're going to be a major disruption, both the federal and the state level. But more importantly, we're going to inspire people. And whatever comes out of this election for me, what I hope is that in the 2024 cycle in North Carolina, we then have 3 or 4 candidates running. And then in 2026, we've got 6 or 8 candidates running, and we keep building, we keep growing. It's entirely possible to do. It's been done before. There is no reason why we can't do it. And particularly when I see, have a conversation like this tonight, and I see the folks in the chat, I recognize names, I learn new names, and I get, it keeps me inspired, it keeps me motivated, and it makes me remember why I'm doing this, right? It goes back to, who do I love and who am I doing this for? Just the same thing for you all. So thank you all night. Ajamu, thank you so much for joining me. This was wonderful. As Rose said, it's such an honor to be able to do this, kind of, like a pinch myself, kind of moment, like, hey, I voted for this guy and I get to hang out and talk with him tonight. I mean, so it's like that type of, it's a wonderful thing for me. But, and I want to thank Rose, of course, for being a wonderful campaign manager and then doing all this kind of work. And then the folks who are part of my campaign, who are on the call tonight, Dave and Nick and Leanne. If there's other folks I didn't see in the chat, please forgive me. And thank you everyone for joining us. Please continue to stay engaged with the campaign. Tell other people about our campaign, and just keep doing everything you're doing in your own personal lives to make our neighborhoods, our society, and our planet better. So thank you all very much. And Rose, I'll give it back to you to close out.
Well, good night all, and thanks so much for being here. It's been a great evening.
All right, good night.
Thank you. Thank you.
Or good day to those who are out further west.
Good night all.
Good night.